Good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Farrell. I am the Chief Executive of Hope Worldwide. Hope Worldwide is a charity which is partners with the International Churches of Christ and with many other supporters as well. And our work in the UK, our core work is to help people facing homelessness to find a home and also to empower people to escape addiction and lead a transformed life through our ODAT program. I just want to take this opportunity to thank so many of you for your amazing continued support, particularly through this uniquely tumultuous times of COVID-19. And that support really allows us to continue the amazing work that we get to do and the privilege to do it as well. This morning, I want to invite us into just answering the question in our hearts this morning, which is, how can I become a more compassionate person? How can I become a more compassionate person? But then what does compassion mean? I mean, my understanding of compassion is it means where we experience an intense emotion, a gut level response where we are deeply moved, and this prompts us to action and to step into other people's lives. When we look at the Bible, we see compassion as a quality of God, but also of his son Jesus. And at Hope Worldwide, we seek to have compassion as one of the core values that exemplify everything that we actually do. But let's look at Jesus' life in Matthew chapter 9 and see something that we can learn to help us become more compassionate as a person. In Matthew chapter 9, verse 35 to 38, it reads, Jesus went throughout all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them, because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out the workers into the harvest field. You know, when I look at this, we see that Jesus in verse 36, he said he had compassion because people are harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. But when we look at it, what is it that got him to the point where he was able to live out that compassion? We get some insight into that in verse 35, where it says Jesus went. And in verse 36, when he saw. When we look at Jesus, he made himself present in the lives of people. He went out to them. He lived with them. He saw their joys, their celebrations, their pains, their sorrows, their sufferings, their sickness. He saw what they were going through in life. And as Jesus went out, he went out to draw people near to God. And each of us are called to imitate the heart of Jesus and bring people near to God. One of the ways that I'm seeking to learn to do that is just to be intentional every single day, that when I get up is make the most of every opportunity where I have the opportunity to live out a life of compassion and imitate the heart and life of Jesus is to do so. And of course, when we do that, we can see in verse 36, Jesus saw a hurting world, and that prompted him, through compassion, to live that out in love with the people around him. And finally, verse 38, he says, Jesus invites us to pray. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into the harvest field. That each and every one of us are invited. You may not have a whole lot of time. You may not have money or whatever. It doesn't matter. All of us can at least pray that the God who will do more than ask or imagine can actually do amazing things of compassion, amazing acts of compassion into a hurting world. And now I'd like to pass you across to Bruce Miller, who runs our drug and alcohol recovery program, and he will share about the impact of love and compassion has had on the life of one of our clients who's come through the program.
This is a story of one of our ODAT graduates called Michael. I started drinking alcohol when I was 14. This social drinking continued until I was 48, when my father died. It was at this point when I started having whiskey miniatures after work, drinking them in one gulp before I got home. The frequency increased, and to keep the cost down, I started drinking quarter bottles. Then half bottles became the standard. When I tried to drink my first half bottle in one gulp, I was sick. However, my tolerance increased, and I was eventually able to do this. Of course, drinking half a bottle after work wasn't enough. My habit grew to drinking half a bottle of whiskey up to 5 times a day. This is where my habit had taken me in the 4 years since my father died. I kept my job as a stonemason for about a year at this level of drinking, but I started getting sick and missing days off work. At home, my wife was at her wit's end. She had to regularly call the ambulance as I had passed out, or even call the police when my behavior got completely out of control and I began to become verbally abusive. She and my son and my daughter begged me to get help, but I would say, I'll get help when I'm ready. Then one day at work, I had a stroke and collapsed. My colleagues rang the ambulance and I was taken to hospital where I remained for about a week. The doctors told me that this stroke was as a result of my drinking, and if it had happened when I was at home in my flat, I would have died. But I continued to drink. This started to yield to constant seizures, which led to dizziness and loss of balance and continual retching. My wife agreed to bring me back home, and she and my children nursed me back to health over a period of about 6 weeks. After recovering, incredibly, I went out and bought a bottle of whiskey. Why did I do this? I had said to myself, I can put it down. I can control this. Of course, this was a massive mistake, but to keep the peace at home, I started getting back into local alcohol services. I didn't want to do it. And the reason I didn't want to do this, it made me feel like a failure, which itself was feeding my drinking habit. I was trapped in a vicious downward spiral. There was an incident at home and the police were called, and I was removed from home and taken to the police station. And one of the conditions of my bail was that I could not return to my home address. My sister agreed to put me up in a hotel, and I continued to drink. I just couldn't stop. It was at this point that the local alcohol services actually had begun the process of getting me into ODAT. I had an assessment, which means I needed a detox, but the queue was over 2 weeks long and I got frustrated and I decided to self-detox at home, and I almost killed myself. After coming out of hospital, I was clean for about 11 days and I got into ODAT. Even though I was blinded by my addiction, over time, through counselling and groups, I began to see the state my life was in, what I'd done to my relationships and with my family. The house that I was staying in had a positive group of like-minded people who understood my position and showed me nothing but support and encouragement. The therapy groups I was a part of opened me up to understanding what I'd done to myself and to those around me. It is this understanding of the power of the calling of drink and how dangerous it is that stops me from reaching out for alcohol and maintaining my abstinence. I'll be clean for 2 years this February, and I'll start to rebuild my relationships with my children, and this is so uplifting. I've also created a bond of positive, close relationships with the people I have come through treatment with, and this is a big help to my ongoing recovery. It's men like Michael that you are helping when you make donations or start fundraising for the Hope Challenge. Please support us if you haven't done so already. And if you have, thank you.